Okay, I'm going to try to clarify some of the items from today's class, which was on the Crusades and interpretations of the Quran. So I started off with this particular timeline here, trying to look at the start of Islam. And for this particular slide, what's important here is that Islam does not exist up until this point, which is considered the birth of Islam. Prior to that, Meccan society, which is a reference to Mecca, is controlled by the Quraysh tribe, and the Quraysh tribe has been given some political power by the storing and protecting of religious artifacts that are located in the Kaaba. Eventually, the Prophet Muhammad gets the message from God, and he starts to preach a message. That message is contradictory to the Quraysh tribe, and the Prophet Muhammad leaves to Medina. Eventually, the Prophet Muhammad returns to Meccan society, but in Medina, since he had gained followers, he reports back to Mecca, and he fights it out with the Quraysh tribe. The Prophet Muhammad and his followers are successful. They had successfully defeated the Quraysh tribe, and that is the birth of Islam once the Prophet Muhammad destroys all of the religious artifacts and declares the birth of Islam, which is going to be the new religion for his followers as well as many of the people from Meccan society. The problem is at the death of Muhammad, who is going to replace Muhammad? Is it going to be his cousin, or will it be somebody else? And that right here, this section looks at the difference between the Shia and the Sunni. It's really about who is going to be the descendant, after the Prophet Muhammad passes. It's interesting to point out that the golden age of Islam is this particular area right here. Part of the reason because the Quran was codified during that time period. So this slide just gives you some of the significant points that I mentioned before. The significance of the Kaaba, Mecca, this Quraysh tribe, and that the Prophet Muhammad pretty much is leading a revolt against the Quraysh tribe, and his followers will be the individuals that start this new religion of Islam. So we talked about the collapse of Islam's golden age. That was last class, and I just found a couple of readings that try to connect the historic significance, for Al-Qaeda, their understanding of religion. So in this particular reading, it's looking at why September 11th, and the argument here is a reference to this particular battle, where there is a European defeat, the Battle of Vienna, which happens on this particular date. So again, bin Laden, his followers, definitely individuals that have a firm grasp on history, which brings up the term crusade. When we look at the term crusade, this is a reference to the Pope sending a Christian army into Jerusalem with the mission of removing Muslims from the area. This creates a situation where the Crusades becomes a hurtful memory and possibly a heroic success. And why do I say that? Because Salahuddin, at some point is successful at defeating the Christian army, and as a result of his success, he becomes a hero among the Muslim community, especially the followers of bin Laden's interpretation of Islam. So when we look at this particular slide, it's looking at the Crusades and where that Christian army is going and what they're doing. And as I said before, Al-Qaeda seems to have a pretty good understanding of history, which brings up this clip here that I played in class, which is September 16th, 2001. And I think the key point here is this.
We understand, and the American people are beginning to understand. This crusade.
Bush's decision to use the word crusade was probably something bin Laden was happy about, because it could confirm for bin Laden that this is a war of religions. And how do we know? Because when we go to Unit 4 and you look up bin Laden's fatwa, or his declaration of war, he actually references the Crusades to justify the 9/11 attacks. So as I wait for that file to open up, let's see, is it this one? Maybe it is. Yeah. Second, so this has Bin Laden's declaration of war dated 98. He says, the devastation inflicted on the Iraqi people by the Crusader Zionist alliance. His choice to use Crusader Zionists is key, because when he uses Crusader, he's looking at, again, he's referencing the Crusades, a time period where the Pope had sent this military to kill Muslims, and the Zionist movement is a reference to the Jewish population that was trying to create a homeland for Jewish people prior to World War I. So in this one, you can interpret this as Christians and Jews have an alliance, and they're trying to exterminate Muslims. So Bin Laden is definitely pretty good at using history and being able to exploit it. So that's why I wanted to play that particular clip from Bush. So let's get back here to the slideshow. So we were here looking at the Salahuddin, and if you went to the Kingdom, which is a reference to the movie The King, so it's the Kingdom of Heaven. They have a scene that talks about Salahuddin and his success at defending Jerusalem during the Crusades. So the remaining part of today's class would simply be about looking at some surahs from the Quran and answering the questions that are here. And again, I'm only concerned with how Bin Laden can potentially use religious texts to justify his acts. So like, in class, we're concerned about knowing the difference between loose and strict interpretation. So if you're a strict interpretation, that means there's no deviating from the text, which means the way the text is written is the way it has to be followed. So we could take something as simple as like the dress code policy or acceptable use. There is no deviating from any of this particular language. Let's take a look at this section. Can a cat be president of the United States? So it says here, no person except a natural born citizen or citizen of the U.S. It doesn't say cat. So if I want to interpret this loosely, I could say since the Constitution doesn't say cat, a cat can become president of the United States. And I guess the other argument would be, well, if you're going to use a strict method of writing, then you would have to be very specific about the groups that can and cannot be president. So I don't know if that's the way we want to go about creating text and documents. So again, strict and loose interpretation. I would say Bin Laden uses a mixture of both, and he uses a mixture of strict and loose interpretation of the Quran because he's just trying to justify his ideology. So if we take a look at the surahs here, let's take a look at Surah 1733. It says, don't take life. So obviously, Al Qaeda took life on 9/11. That is inconsistent with the Quran, Surah 1733. I would say Bin Laden is not using a strict method of following this text because he has taken life. He is responsible for that. However, if we want to justify his acts, we can go to Surah 191. Here it says, fight them not at the sacred mosque unless they first fight you there. But if they fight you, slay them. So if you slay them, that's contradictory to this one here. So you can take life, but it is conditional. And the condition here is that unless they fight you first. So Bin Laden has to first figure out a way to say that America has fought Muslims at the sacred mosque. And as a result of that, Bin Laden is justified in taking life, which would make him, somebody that is actually following the Quran. So again, the point here is just to look at religious texts and see how you can use it to justify, whatever it is that you are doing. And that's something that Bin Laden definitely seems to be concerned with. And that's pretty much where we're at. So hopefully this clarifies, some of the class today. And what I want you to do for homework is simply use these sections of the Quran and take a look at this one. Apply any surah to your life. So I want you to take any of these surahs and just, apply them. How can you use this to justify an area of your life? So that definitely seems to be the question that I want you to address. And here is saying apply any section from the Quran to justify the U.S. response to 9/11. So these are the questions that you're responsible for, and hopefully that helps you, understand a little more about today's class.